you. Can you hear me fine at the back? This microphone's loud enough? Great. Too loud? Shall I move away? Great. Good afternoon, everybody. It's just turned 12 o'clock. I think it is afternoon. Allow me to briefly introduce myself. It is the first time I had the privilege of being with all of you at the Retail Association Forum. My name is Shridar. As you can tell from my accent, not native Indian. I'm actually from Singapore. Had the pleasure of working in India for the past 4 to 5 years, focusing on analytics and performance management. But please forgive me for having that technology company name card. My pedigree and background is actually in finance. So I started my career in KPMG. I ended up doing finance, performance management, finance operational improvement, finance target operating model, shared services, and latterly all of those roads converged into technology-enabled best practices. And that has led me into a career in information technology, consulting, and now more into analytics, which is really the context of this next 2 to 3 minutes, which I'd like to set, which more or less prefaces a panel discussion that we'll have, which Kumar will shortly brief us on. We've had a very interesting morning so far, and a kind of great afternoon ahead of us in terms of the sessions, in terms of the networking, in terms of the exhibitors, including one of our own IBM partners at the back there, Boss. A few key points that I wanted to touch on that Mr. Mehta made in his keynote, which I thought were very poignant. So he talked about the traditional CFO or accounting roles. You know, he didn't use the word bean counter, but you know, the implication, you know, accountant, bean counter. And there's a tension between that traditional role and the necessity of that and more progressive requirements. So really the CFO more as a business partner. So how do we get through to that evolution where the CFO's role is not just as a bean counter and not just in some of the key topics that we have in the panels today. In the afternoon, the panels are on regulation and risk, which are core finance, financial control topics. Is that really something that we aspire to become CFOs, leaders in finance, strategists to the business? Or are those operational? Both are important, but how do we bridge that gap? Right? So how do we continue doing those old tasks while keeping pace with all the disruptions in the market, evolutions in the way that supply chains, technology, our consumers are evolving? We talk about things like Uberization, social media, multiple payment channels, which Kumar mentioned, hyper-local business models, having really ultra segmentation in terms of products, in terms of customers, and being able to meet the customer demands in that environment. You know, how can finance move away, something that Mr. Mehta also mentioned, from that pre-facto mode of just being able to do some analysis, what happened, why did it happen, into a post-facto mode? Well, what shall we do next? What is going to happen? Given all of what we know and all of how that had turned out, what's going to happen next? In finance, we're blessed with, or cursed with, the burden of being the guardians of external information. Statutory reporting, internal management reports. We have this version of truth, which we should consider as the holy grail. How do we turn that into something where we can actually help the business predict what's going to happen, prescribe the next courses of action? I'll give an example in terms of, you know, the annual budgeting, for example. Rather than just collating the annual budget, consolidating the forecasts, and then leaving it to the business to carry on business as usual, why don't we look at systems which allow us to change the conversation from how did you get to that number, what are the assumptions, to instead being, since that is what the number is, because of all the science behind it, because of all the advanced predictive analytics behind it, what shall we do next? How shall we get together with finance as a linchpin to decide what route to take to optimize our resource allocation activities? What strategic initiatives do we take to bridge the gap between where we're heading and where we need to be? And do that necessary modeling around all of those extraneous factors. What happens if a geo launches? What happens if we manage to get some spectrum? I'm thinking more from a telco perspective. In retail, what happens if we have ability to launch new products 1 to 2 months ahead of time? What if we can shave 1 to 2% off of our cost? How do we do that? It's very difficult to think about how we do that when people are still working on spreadsheets. When it takes 18 months to just get a single view of an enterprise data warehouse, right? And these are the very real constraints which are there, they've been there for the past 20 years that I've been doing this, that are stopping finance from really taking that leap into that business partnering strategist sort of role, right? So a key part of this is enabling finance with the right set of technologies, unshackling finance from monolithic IT systems which require a 6-week change request to get a simple report done, to add a new data source. Because with social media, with new competition, with the need to adapt, we need to be ultra responsive. So the concepts of self-service, not just from basic analysis, but self-service from advanced predictive analytics, self-service from prescriptive next best action, that needs to be put in the hands of regular finance analysts. And this is a point from the keynote as well. How do we turn from analysts to strategists? So technology plays a key role in that part of things. And it changes the finance role from a bean counter to a business partner. So I didn't want to speak much more than that. I had no slides. I know we have an interesting panel discussion after this, so I'll leave the rest for that.